What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another live stream here on Rangers Central. And we are doing a special live stream, a special edition here on Rangers Central, because we're doing a different type of stream. That's why it's special. It's not really special as if it's like anything cool here. We're just doing something different. We are going to be doing a debate stream because the question that I get asked every single live stream at this point, the question that is all over Twitter, the debate that's all over Twitter, we're bringing it to YouTube. We're bringing it live. And that debate is, should the New York Rangers pay Igor Shesterkin or not? Well, sort of, because I do think that everybody feels a similar way where, or maybe not. I should say that there's two sides of, not that they shouldn't pay Igor, but there's a limit for how much the Rangers should pay Igor. And I happen to fall in that camp where I believe that the Rangers should, if they're going to pay Igor, it's got to be a certain price point and a certain price point only. And the Rangers shouldn't be doing everything in their power to keep him and accommodate him if his demands are true from what we're hearing from reports. Because based on every report, and I believe that these reports are accurate because I feel like a deal would have been done by now, he is looking to reset the goalie market, and he's looking to be the highest paid player on the team and go up to around $12 million. And if that's the case, I'm not on board with that. I quite frankly am not. I'm going to plead my case, but this is where I have you guys in here to plead your case if you fall on the other side of the coin here, to give your argument of why you want Igor Shesterkin to get the bag, get whatever he wants, and why you're saying just pay the man his money. It does not matter what it is. Because there's a lot to get into. I don't even know if this is the right time, honestly, to go live at 5:30 on a Friday. I don't know if this is the best time to go live, but honestly, I don't know when else we're really going to have this. I'm really going to have time for this debate. It would have waited for some point during the week or something, and I just don't think that was a good idea. And I couldn't do it really over the weekend because the Mets are going to get my priority right now. So there is that. But regardless, and then football, of course, on Sunday. Have to be dialed into that, and I'm assuming everyone in the live chat will be doing that. But before we jump into everything, leave a like, subscribe, and everything. I know my hair looks a little weird. I just got out of the shower, so ignore that. But we're gonna get into the good stuff. Let's see who's in the chat, though. Christopher, what's going on? What do I think it would take to sign Linus Ullmark? We'll get into that in a little bit. If the number starts with a 1, there could be trouble. I honestly agree with that to an extent. I think that 10 million is the max they should go. I was in the pay Igor what he wants camp, but you have convinced me. What would Ullmark want? Will he be available? Like I said, we'll get into all that. 9.5 per 5 years, and let's win some cups. I don't think that he's going to take a 5-year deal. It's going to be 7 or 8 years, depending on if he hits the UFA market or if the Rangers sign him at 8. Ideally, you get to make both sides happy, make Igor the highest paid goalie, 10.6, and get rid of Trouba next year at his $8 million cap hit. Okay, so you feel 10.6 is a reasonable price. I mean, I could somewhat understand pushing there, but I'm still not entirely there. My wife thinks that this is the year for the Rangers. She said the fact that it might be the last year of this core is true cardiac Rangers fashion. Yeah, I mean, this is it. This is the supposed last dance, which that's going to be part of my case here, of course, as to why I don't think the Rangers should give the type of money that we're talking here. It's also tough because he's been so good in the playoffs, and he has had his Vezina year. His regular seasons as of lately have been average overall. So let's get into the meat and potatoes here of the argument and my case as to why I am against the idea of giving Igor Shesterkin north of 10 million. And like I said, there's a lot of reasons, so buckle up, grab your popcorn, whatever. This is going to be a long case, to be honest with you, because I've had a lot of time to think, and I've tried to see the other side of the argument. And quite frankly, I find myself coming back to, I don't really see the other side enough here, because the whole argument from the camp that wants to pay Igor whatever he wants is that he is your best chance to win. He is the backbone of the team, and he's your best chance at a Stanley Cup. And I agree to an extent to that point. And the reason I say to an extent is because the Rangers are not in a position to where, and no team does this. Like, could anybody in the chat name me a team that is built from the goal out? You just cannot do it. There is not a team in the cap era, at the very least, that is built from the goal out. And if you are paying Igor Shesterkin north of 10 million, or especially making him the highest paid player on the team, you are giving him the keys, and you are basically saying, it is your show. You are the guy we are leaning on to win a Stanley Cup. That does not happen. Number two, the Rangers have not been able to win with him at $5.6 million. And what makes us think here he's going to win a Stanley Cup here if he's making $12 million? And that is despite him putting up a .929 save percentage his first postseason appearance. Well, outside the bubble. I'm not counting that one game in the bubble here. .929 save percentage, .931 save percentage, .927 last year. Despite all of that, they have not won a Stanley Cup. With those numbers, you would expect one, right? Like, if you were able to build from the goal out and rely on your goaltending, you would think they should have won Stanley Cup right now. Well, if he's making 5.6 and we're talking doubling his salary potentially, then what makes anyone think that they're going to be able to win a Stanley Cup with him making $12 million and being leaned on even more as the guy to win the Stanley Cup? Because he's not going to be able to fix the 5v5 issues. He is not going to be able to fix the issues down the middle, especially with Mika Zibanejad. And this is the debate that I'm seeing a lot, and people being like, well, you know, they paid Trouba this amount of money and Zibanejad's a bad contract, but the one guy that shows up you don't want to pay. In my opinion, why are we saying, okay, because these are bad contracts doesn't mean this won't be a bad contract? And here is the biggest thing, in my opinion, that I think is the strongest case for my argument, and I think is the strongest case for everyone that is on my side in this argument. Is he worth $5 million more than UC Saros? Because all the talk is the cap is going up. Well, UC Saros could have easily asked for more. Is he worth $5 to $6 million more than UC Saros? No. I would argue no. And I get that the playoff numbers are what they are with Igor Shesterkin, but I would argue no. I really would. And then on top of that, Connor Hellebuyck, he has 2 Vezinas to his name, and I get that he struggled in the postseason, but you could argue, okay, he's good in the regular season, not as good in the playoffs. Igor's kind of the opposite lately, where he's struggled really in the regular season, then produced in the playoffs. Is he worth that much more, $4 million more than Connor Hellebuyck? I would say no. I just don't believe that is the case. My next argument here. Look at the goalies that have got recent contracts. You have that, like, mega contracts, I should say. You have Sergei Bobrovsky, and Sergei Bobrovsky just won a Stanley Cup. But context matters with these things. Did they win the Stanley Cup because of Sergei Bobrovsky? No. Because you and I and everybody knows from watching that series that Igor Shesterkin outplayed Sergei Bobrovsky in that series. But the reason the Panthers won is because they have a guy named Alexander Barkov as their center. They have a guy in Matthew Tkachuk on their wings. They have a guy in Carter Verhaeghe putting up goals left and right on their team. They have a guy in Sam Reinhart being a great asset for them. Evan Rodriguez, which this is the main thing. They found reclamation projects out of nowhere and made them into something. Gustav Forsling was a waiver pickup and became an elite defenseman for them. Evan Rodriguez, they picked up for $3 million, became a key contributor for that team. They drafted Anton Lundell, which you give them some credit for that too as well. Sam Bennett, they traded basically nothing to get the guy. You see what I'm saying? So that's your one example for a goalie that was on a mega contract that has won a Stanley Cup. But let's not forget context matters here too. The first 4 years of that contract, there were talks of Florida running this guy out of town. He was that bad. He was horrendous for them. There were Alex Lyon, let's not forget, took over games in the year they went to the Stanley Cup Finals. That's how bad Sergei Bobrovsky's performance was. And it was to a point where there were talks of buying him out. It got to a point where the Florida Panthers drafted a goalie in the first round because they did not trust Sergei Bobrovsky that much. You don't know what you're getting from goaltending. Goaltending is very volatile, in my opinion. And even this year, in the regular season, he put up solid numbers. I'll give that to him. But again, the postseason, you look at the numbers and they almost choked the Stanley Cup Finals. But then your next argument is Andrei Vasilevsky, who is on a $9.5 million deal, and he won a Stanley Cup under one time. One of the cups was under that contract because the other cup, he was still under a $3.5 million cap hit, which was the first cup they won. The second cup, he was under the $9.5 million. But again, context matters with these things because Nikita Kucherov spent the entire season on long-term injury reserve, and then they activated him come playoff time, and they were able to have a deep roster still because he was on LTIR the entire season. So again, context matters with those things. Now we look at the non-outliers who have won a Stanley Cup. You got Adin Hill. Did anybody expect Adin Hill to be what he was? Darcy Kemper had a sub-900 save percentage in the playoffs the year the Avalanche won the Stanley Cup. Jordan Binnington, until last year, that's a guy that has been close to being run out of town. We were talking about that being a terrible contract for St. Louis, and that's not even that heavy of a contract. It's around $6 million, I believe. You have Antti Niemi, who won cups. Matt Murray won cups. You have, I'm trying to think of the other names, but for some reason I'm just blanking right now. But regardless, those are your names for guys that have won Stanley Cups. And what's the common denominator with a lot of those teams? They have a deep forward core. They have a deep defensive core. They did not build their teams from the net out. They didn't. And you could argue that those guys were elite in their seasons, especially Jordan Binnington's case, because when he came up, I mean, his numbers were absolutely ridiculous. I'll give that to you. But at the same time, he has not really lived up to that contract since. He hasn't. And that's another main point is look at how many of these goalies, their contracts, I mean, they have not aged right. Like Andrei Vasilevsky even, we're not talking about him being a top 5 goalie anymore. And if anyone's mentioning him being a top 5 goalie, it's at this point because of the name. Because if you look at his seasons over the past 3 years, he's been a .915 save percentage goalie. Last year, a .900 save percentage goalie, dealing with back issues among that. And the guy is 30 years old. Ilya Sorokin just signed a deal, dealing with back injuries. Carey Price still getting paid $10.5 million. Not playing. He's not playing right now. There's injury risk heavily with the goaltending position like that. It's a physically demanding, even though you're not necessarily taking hits unless it's dirty hits and everything. Just because of that, you're still, you know, a lot of it is your hips, your back, a lot of that. Yeah, Rick DiPietro still getting paid. If we were talking about a non-salary cap league, I'd be absolutely on board, but we're not here. And I hear the argument because the argument that always gets thrown back is, well, the cap's going up. Cap's going up. What does it matter? And Jacob Trouba is probably getting moved. So there's your money. But I also would want to pose this question. I have a couple questions I'd like to pose after that. One, how does it affect your cap long term? Because you can't project, because what if there is a world where Igor Shesterkin's contract, because he's a goalie and the risk that we're talking about, in 3-4 years, what if what if he's a guy that's a rotational goalie or even a backup at 12 million? You want 12 million going to that? No. Number two, if this is the last dance with this core potentially and you're going into a mini retool, why are you giving a 30-year-old goaltender a 7-8 year deal worth $12 million annually? Number three, you don't know what the future holds of your team's cap either way, because I got news for you. Lafreniere's going to need a raise after this year. Keandre Miller's going to need a raise after this year. Braden Schneider's going to need a raise in a couple of years. Zach Jones needs a raise after this year. You're going to have to fill a left shot defensive spot potentially. You're going to have to fill a right wing spot because Riley Smith and Capo Caco are up after this year. You have Will Cooley, who's going to make more money. Matt Rempe's due for a raise. You have so many different... Jimmy Vesey's out the door after this year, so that's a piece that you're losing there. You have so many different pieces that you still have... You have to give raises to. And to me, I look at it this way. This core has not won anything. Why are we going to commit all this money to a core that hasn't won anything? And you're giving yourself less flexibility with a Igor contract. And I get, again, the argument that he is your best chance to win. But I also look at it as he is not worth $12 million, even if he is your best chance to win, because goalies do not win championships. We just saw it with Henrik Lundqvist. And then on top of that, this is my final question, and then I'm going to turn it over to the chat and see if anybody is rebuttaling and countering my arguments here, because it is a debate. I don't want to just hog up and give you guys my earful. But my biggest argument too, would you rather, and this is the point that I brought up in the latest post-game show, would you rather a world where the Rangers could sign potentially for that 12 or maybe just above that, like let's say $14 million to be on the safe side? Would you rather them spend $14 million on a defenseman, Linus Ullmark, and Carter Verhaeghe, or would you rather that go to Igor Shesterkin? I know my answer. I would rather create a deeper roster, because the history has shown these deep rosters are the ones that win championships. And what Florida did last year, good for them. Good for them. They won with a goalie at that cap hit. Congrats to them. But unless the Rangers are finding these reclamation projects and turning them into legit bona fide players, I don't see it. I just do not see it working that way. But I will see what you guys are saying in the chat now. Since I've gave my case, I want to see if anybody is rebuttaling and giving their case. So let's see. I'm not giving him whatever he wants, but my fear is the Devils will sign him if the Rangers don't. The Devils are not signing him. The Devils just committed to Markstrom being their goalie. They're not going to go ahead and just give up on Markstrom after trading the assets they did for him. He's got 2 years on that deal. Sure, you could argue that maybe they don't care as much, but I can't see that being the case, because they're going to have to pay Luke Hughes. They're going to have to pay Nemec at some point. They're going to have to pay a lot of different players at some point. They still have a couple other prospects that have yet to come up for them. They're not necessarily in the spot to where they could just go out and give Igor Shesterkin that money. I at least don't think they are, based on their cap construction. I don't know. I could be wrong, but you can't worry about what the Devils do just because, like, you can't operate your business because of what other teams do. You just can't do it that way. And if the Devils sign him, you, me, everyone else will be devastated by that. Trust me, we'll freaking hate it. But you can't make your business decisions based on what other teams are doing. But then you compare to Hellbuck, who is shit in the playoffs. That's what really matters. If we overpay Igor and Laff turns into a superstar, we'll lose him and any future big contract possibilities. And that's the thing too, like with Lafreniere, if he has the breakout year that you, me, and everyone has been talking about, I mean, he's easily already getting more than Slavkovsky. I don't think that's even a debate. I don't think that's up for discussion. And Slavkovsky got 7.6. We're in a world where Lafreniere could legitimately get $9 million. We're in a cap world where, because everyone's mentioning the cap's going up, it doesn't matter. Okay, but that's the same argument you could use for Keandre Miller to plead for $7 million. You could use for Lafreniere to get $10 million. So it's not like just moving Trouba, it's just poof, that opens up the cap. Because if it was that simple, if it was where Lafreniere was already extended long term and all these other guys, and they didn't have that many holes to fill, and it was just as simple as get rid of Trouba plus the $4 million cap increase, there's your Igor money, I wouldn't give a shit. I really wouldn't at that point. But it's not that simple. It just isn't. That's the issue here. Name a team that won without a hot goaltender in the playoffs. I agree that those teams have goalies that get hot, but they aren't elite goalies, is my point. The other thing is if they don't pay him and don't make smart moves with the money, it will really be unfortunate. That's the argument. That's the one argument that I could justify from the other side of things, where will the Rangers spend that cap wisely? I don't know. But this is also my problem, is that it feels like Chris Drury doesn't believe in himself, doesn't it? Because if he's willing to do cartwheels and backflips to let Igor Shesterkin, a UFA, hold all the leverage and dictate everything here, doesn't that say something about Chris Drury's GMing skills, that he feels that, yeah, I'm not good enough, so I have to give Igor the money to mask the fact that I'm not a good enough GM? That's my opinion on that, at least. And that's the thing, too. Let's not forget that Igor Shesterkin, it is consecutive seasons now where there's been a month to 2 month stretch of him playing poorly. If he's on a $12 million deal, that is going to intensify how pissed we get by $1 billion. It just is. I would be okay knowing he's not on the team if we were guaranteed to get people who are game/culture changers, Kachuk type, or postseason goal scoring machines. That I agree with. People say Florida, but where's the Kachuk on this team? I don't ask just where's the Kachuk. I ask where's the Reinhart, who they got for virtually nothing. Where's the Reinhart on this team? Where's the Barkov on this team? Where is the Rodriguez on this team? Where's the Verhaeghe on this team? Where is the Forsling on this team? I mean, you could argue they have, an Adam Fox there, who's better than Forsling, but just, I mean, in the sense where you're getting quality, like elite play on the premium. Because right now the Rangers have two of those guys, excluding Igor Shesterkin, outplaying their contracts right now, and that is Trocheck and Lafreniere. Until we see Filipino prove otherwise on that deal, of course. And that's true. We don't know what Drury envisions the core being. Goalies who win Stanley Cups get paid. Sorry, it's this year or not. So you're saying if Igor wins, then he deserves the money? See, that I could get behind. That's rational thinking, because my whole thing is, until the Rangers prove, and it would have to be this year, unless they prove they could win because of Igor Shesterkin being the driving force, then I'm not willing to pay him, because if the ceiling is just the Eastern Conference Finals every year, then what are we doing? Why are we wasting our time with this for another 7-8 years then at that point? But if they prove they could win because of him being the driving force, that changes my entire conversation. Then I don't care. Give him whatever he wants at that point. Igor is our best player, especially in the playoffs. I say sign him 4 or 5 years at 10.5 to 11 a year, not 6, 7, 11.5, 13. That's too much. We need Igor. The problem is you're not getting him at that price point. The problem is you're not getting him at 4 to 5 years. He's going to demand that 7, 8 year deal, and he's going to demand north of 11.5 million. He wants to be the highest paid player. He wants to reset the goalie market, and good for him. Good for him. But the Rangers are not in a spot financially where they should be doing that. That's my opinion. If this core is done after this year and it turns into a semi-retool, then who are we getting? I have no clue. Zero clue what the plan is on that. He has 3 to 4 years in his prime. He isn't getting any younger. Benoit Lair not being day-to-day, not being there day-to-day will be a factor. And that's another thing, too. I really want to see how this thing goes with Igor not having Benoit Lair on a day-to-day basis. And I'm very curious to see how things go. But this is another argument that I have too. If there's a seamless transition, because Jonathan Quick was virtually out of the league until the Rangers decided to give him a contract. If not, if he had another down year, he was out the door of the league. But they got quality goaltending out of Jonathan Quick. The Rangers' biggest strength is developing goaltending. Why should they pay where their biggest strength is instead of paying to cover their weaknesses? Is my question too for anyone that wants to pay Igor that much money. Why should they pay for their strength when they could just easily... this team develops goalies left and right. Look at how many goalies they've developed over the years. Cam Talbot, you have Antti Ranta, Georgiev. I know Georgiev's play has declined since leaving, but again, that just shows that the Rangers have a luxury here of goaltending. They found a fix with Jonathan Quick to revive him to give better play. See what I'm saying? He has low miles on him, didn't play a tremendous amount in the KHL. That's a fair argument, but I want to check now, because now you have me curious what the comparison is with Sorokin's game logs. And obviously Sorokin's going to have more because he spent more time in the KHL, but I'm curious to see now what the deal is with that. I mean, they both have like similar workloads, and then like Sorokin's play declined heavily, and his contract just kicked in. Like, he lost his job too. And Igor is going to be 30 by the time this extension kicks in. Ask Devil fans how life has been since Brodeur left. But at the same time, do you fault that to lack of goaltending, or do you fault that to not building a good enough roster in front of said goaltending? And I think they found their goalie that's going to help them go far this year. I mean, I know Markstrom's on the older side of things, but they built a good roster in front of him. They have a very good roster, and now they have him with cap retained. I think his cap hit's like 4 point something since they got him with retention. See what I'm saying? And on top of that, Brodeur also had a good team in front of him. He did. Like, Brodeur did not face a lot of shots in the games he played because they built their team they built from in front of him, first of all. Second of all, when he won the cups, that was before the cap era. You know what I'm saying? But then you look at a team like the Canes, who are a beast of the regular season team, and their goaltending being shit is what has allowed the Rangers to knock them out each year. To an extent, yes. To an extent, no. Because if the Rangers, if the Canes special teams were even half decent, they probably beat the Rangers at least one of the 2 years. Like, their special teams really is horrendous. But again, you also have the other side of the argument here, where the Panthers were really good in the regular season as well, and Panthers knocked the Rangers out. And the Lightning had a lesser regular season than the Rangers a couple seasons ago, and the Lightning beat them. Panthers beat the Rangers because of Trouba and Mika. So here's my question, though. So Trouba's probably gone after this year. But my question is, with Mika, what are you doing there? You're like, how are you getting an upgrade over Mika Zibanejad? He's here for the long haul. Where's the better player coming from? Unless the Rangers are moving out, unless Phil Pedal stays injury-free and takes a huge step forward to become a elite talent, or unless they are moving Phil Pedal and Vinny Trocheck in the future to replace those two with a really, really elite number one center. And I'm talking like a Jack Eichel if he hits the market, or a Connor McDavid if he hits the market. Where are you getting a legit number one center from if you give Igor the steal? Where's the money coming from? Serious question asking because I genuinely am horrible with understanding the cap, etc. If they pay him 10.65 to 11 versus 9 to 9.5, does it really allow the Rangers to build a ton more for the team? In a world where every single dollar counts in the cap, yes, it does. It does. And I just worry. My biggest worry is the contract aging poorly. I mean, we've seen it with these goalies time and time again. And the problem also is that you're already locked into so many horrendous contracts right now. Do you really want to run the risk of potentially another contract that could age poorly? Toronto and Carolina are great examples of why you need goaltending. Both teams are solid every year. But again, Colorado won with a goalie having a sub 900 save percentage of the year they won the cup. Braden Holtby was the backup to start the playoffs when they won the cup in Washington. Jordan Binnington, hot at the right time. Adin Hill, hot at the right time. And honestly, Toronto had a chance to go on a somewhat of a run this year if Joseph Woll remained healthy. Because let's not forget, Joseph Woll was playing unbelievable. He was playing freaking unreal for them. Just unfortunately, he had to deal with injuries there. And then Samsonov, I mean, he is just, ooh. But do you need an elite level goalie? Do you? Because again, I asked the question, what elite goalie outside of Sergei Bobrovsky and Andrei Vasilevsky have won Stanley Cups? And again, there are context matters with that. And are the Rangers in a spot where if they give Igor $12 million, when they can't win with him at 5.6, are they in a spot where they're going to win with him at $12 million? My argument's probably not. Some same people saying give Igor what he wants will be the same ones complaining about the cap in a year. My biggest fear is, God forbid, they lose Lafreniere to an offer sheet because of this. I mean, if they lose Lafreniere to an offer sheet because of this, I'd be very freaking pissed off. I can tell you that right now. And I'm sorry, but I'm just not giving Igor Shesterkin 12. I'm not giving him 4 to 5 million more than Connor Hellebuck, Ilya Sorokin, and Andrei Vasilevsky, UC Soros, those guys. Like, I'm sorry. Sure, he's one of the better goalies in the NHL, but he is not that. He's not on a pedestal of his own. And there was a report that Jeremy Swayman's asking for 8x8 and the Boston Bruins aren't willing to do that. I mean, Jeremy Swayman's freaking great. I'll tell you right now, I would freaking take Jeremy Swayman here at an 8x8. Only elite goalies to win when they were elite was Tim Thomas, Anthony Niemi, Cam Ward, and Darcy Kemper have cups. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, these are some of the names of guys that have Stanley Cups. Sorry if I skipped over some comments. There's just so many right now. But Evan, Hank did everything he could. Never a mistake in the playoffs. Only let down by his team. Now we, in my opinion, have a better team. Igor is obviously the best goalie in the league. Depth is good. Igor is great. Let me ask you this, R. Since I don't... Is this Rocco? Let me ask you this. So, would you trade the memories of Henrik Lundqvist? And I love Henrik Lundqvist to death. He's the reason I fell in love with the game. But would you trade those memories of Henrik Lundqvist for a Stanley Cup? And is this team better than those teams? Because I could tell you right now that those teams got closer to winning a Stanley Cup than this team did. It's just the facts. I mean, that those teams got to Game 7 of the conference finals. That team got to a Stanley Cup finals, got to Game 6 of the conference finals in 2012. I mean, there's a legit argument that that team was closer than this team has been. This fan base would be crying about paying McDavid if we had him? No, because the difference is you're paying a guy that plays a very premium position at center. Look at all of the cup-winning teams. They all consist of a dog playing center, to use that term there. They all consist of the best at center position. Sidney Crosby, Jonathan Toews in his peak, Nathan McKinnon, last year Barkov. Who am I forgetting right now? I mean, the list goes on, though, either way. Look at all of the legit beasts down the middle that have led their teams to a cup. In comparison to Jack Eichel, someone just named. In comparison to the elite goalies that have won Stanley Cups. Bergeron, thank you. I don't know why I was blanking on names. Eichel, Bergeron. And now compare it to the goalies that have won, the elite goalie names that have won, especially in the cap era. Because I just listed a laundry, I mean, I gave a laundry list of centers that won Stanley Cups that are elite centers. I can name you Kopitar. I could count on one hand how many elite goalies have won Stanley Cups in the cap era. Stamkos, Point, Getzlaf. And what's the common denominator with a lot of those guys as well? Their goaltenders just got hot at the right time. They're not actually elite. Outside of Vasilevsky, of course. Vasilevsky is an exception to that. But I'm trying to see if there's any other comments up here that I skipped that are important. If you guys feel your comment was important, just re-comment. Yeah, Datsuk and Zetterberg, like, look at this list of centers that we just named. And then elite goalies, you count it on one hand in the cap era of elite goalies that have won Stanley Cups. Count on one. You just don't build from the net out. I'm sorry, you just don't. And I love Igor Shesterkin. Like, this is, I want to make that very clear. And they had Osgood, exactly. They had Osgood in that. But this is my point. That I love Igor Shesterkin. And I would freaking miss Igor Shesterkin being in goal. But for the betterment of the team, you have to build it with a deep center core and a deep defensive core. So like I said, unless Philip Hedl is going to magically stay healthy for this year and take a massive step forward, and unless Mika Zibanejad's rebounding from that, they have to allocate the money up front versus in goal. They're just not, I just don't think they're in a financial position to just give Igor whatever he wants. If he wants to get 9.5, 10 million, like, sure, that's a little bit more reasonable. It's still a high price and it's still a lot, but you could at least tolerate that a bit more, I guess you could say. But it is not the same thing. Elite versus hot is not the same thing. Elite goalies are guys that you're talking about on a yearly basis that have the longevity, that are your consistent top goalies, that are your Andre Vasilevskys, that are your Connor Hellebuycks, that are your Roberto Luongos, that are your Henrik Lundqvist, that are your Carey Price. You know what the common denominator is with all those goalies outside of the first guy named an Andre Vasilevsky? They all are combined for 0 Stanley Cups. How many elite goalies retire without a cup? How many of them? Like, come on now. There are so many elite goalies that go cupless versus the guys that you find and get hot at the right time at a premium price, like a Matt Murray, like an Aiden Hill, like Darcy Kemper didn't even do that. Darcy Kemper didn't even get hot at the right time. They literally, Colorado just outscored their problems that year. They just completely outscored all their issues. And that's why they're still in the cup conversation on an annual basis, because even though Georgiev blows for them, we saw them do it with Darcy Kemper, and their roster is still deep to the point where they're in the conversation year in and year out. And you know what else is a point with that? They got a career year out of Nazem Kadri the year they won the Stanley Cup. And ever since Nazem Kadri has departed, where have they been? Where have they been? You need a hot goalie or no, you don't need an elite one. Again, I just explained the difference. And sure, you need a goaltender that's serviceable, but you're not. Why would you pay $12 million for it when the guys that I named were nowhere near sniffing that type of money, and they came out of nowhere and came at a premium position, or came at a premium price rather? Like, we're all raving about how the Devils are a cup contender because they're a deep roster and they've got a competent goaltender. If the Devils had if they had Markstrom last year, they're a playoff team, and who knows where they go with how deep that roster is. And obviously injuries kill that team every year, but they have such a deep roster. That's why they're in the conversation right now to be a cup caliber team. And people say, oh, the Toronto Maple Leafs, for example. The Toronto Maple Leafs, they're another team that spent their cap poorly. Like, they didn't allocate it to goaltending, but they're so top heavy because look at their depth outside of the core four, if you will. And even then, I mean, forget about it with freaking Tavares, who's significantly overpaid. But with those guys, they don't have the depth because of it. They don't have the depth to win a Stanley Cup because those guys are making a significant amount of money. The Rangers would be doing a very similar thing because you have $12 million then tied up. I mean, they would be tying up. You're committing to a core at this point because you would have $12 million on Igor. I need to get the exact cap wages page pulled up, which I freaking miss cap friendly, but it's a whole separate thing. Cap wages, here we go. You would have 8.5 tied up to Mika. You would have 5.6 to Trocheck. Phil Pedal at 4.4. Lafreniere potentially at $9 million. Adam Fox at 9.5. Keandre Miller at around 7 potentially, and then Igor at 12. That is 7 players making what, like, north of $55 million of your $92 million available in cap. It's a lot of money for 7 players that have not won you a damn thing. Calls bluff. Where's Igor going? I stand by what I said. If Igor walks in UFA, I think he goes to Toronto because they're going to have Marner and Tavares off the books. And I think at that point, they're going to think goaltending solves their problems and they're going to overpay Igor, and it's not going to solve their problems. That's my opinion, if I had to take a guess. And if it's not them, well, I got to look at a list of teams that could make sense. Anaheim maybe would make sense because Anaheim was trying to be aggressive this free agency, and freaking God help us about John Gibson being in trade rumors every year. And maybe they'll finally freaking get out of Gibson's contract after this year. And if they do, then maybe they're a destination for Igor Shesterkin. They'll give whatever he wants to him. I could see, let's see where else. I could see Chicago making a push as well. I could see, let's see, not Detroit. Edmonton would, but they have other priorities. I mean, if Edmonton could get out of the Nurse contract, maybe there's an argument there. LA, if they could open cap, maybe they're in on him. But, and before someone says, why would he want to play for the Chicago Blackhawks who are rebuilding? Clearly his priorities are winning or getting the most money possible and not winning. Right? Clearly that's his priorities. Do I think the Rangers should focus more on defense like Florida? Yes. Florida and a deep center core. Because, like I said, you build your forward group and your defensive core, and then you get your goaltender. You don't build this thing the other way around. You can't reverse engineer it. That's just not how it works. And the history shows you that. That's my problem with paying Igor as much money as we're talking about. You don't want to reverse engineer it. Most cup teams have 2 elite D-men. Ducks, Pronger, Niedermeyer, Hawks, Keith, Seabrook, Avs, Taves, McCarr, Tampa, Hedman, McDonough, Rangers, elite, Zubov. Fox is elite, but who's number 2? Yeah, it's a good argument too. Selke guys matter. Sorelli, Datsuk, Zetterberg, Taze, Kopitar, Bergeron, Crosby, elite defensive centers. And the difference is because somebody I'm sure is going to mention how great Mika is defensively. Mika doesn't put up the production they do offensively. Sorry, but it's the truth. He doesn't. And if he could rebound to being even respectable at 5v5, maybe that changes that conversation. But he's still getting outdueled. Once we get deeper into the postseason, he's still getting outdueled by... He's second fiddle to Braden Point. He's second fiddle to Alexander Barkov. He's second fiddle to a lot of these guys once we get to the deeper rounds. He was second fiddle to Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes in that round against the Devils. Like, there are so many teams where the Rangers go up against them, and he's second fiddle. And without Trocheck playing at the level he did, I mean, God help us against Carolina. Florida ran Barkov and Lundell out there and silenced their opposition. Yep. Vegas, Pietrangelo, and Theodore. Panthers, Ekblad, Forsling, and Montour. Yeah. You got to have the deep D core, and you got to have the deep center core. I just don't think... Like, I'm sorry, you can't build this thing backwards. That's my opinion on that. I'm trying to hear the other end of it, and I get that fans love Igor, and I get that people are arguing that he is the best chance to win. But realistically, do we think he could bail this team out to win a Stanley Cup when the history has shown otherwise? Like I said, if the Rangers win the Cup this year and Igor is the driving force, then I don't care. Then pay Igor at that point. You prove to me that you could win with him being the backbone and carrying the team. But the history has shown, and with this organization in general, that you can't build from the net out. It has to be the other way around. And I hope so too, because then we're really happy. Then we are really happy if he changes his mind all of a sudden and wants to take a pay cut. If he does that, great. Great, sign me up. As long as Zibanejad is the top center, the Rangers cannot be taken as serious contenders, unfortunately. Unless he turns back the clock to be 2019, 2020 Mika, which I think that ship has sailed a long time ago at this point. It's hard to envision that. It really is hard to envision that. Yeah. But who knows? I've been wrong many a day, so who knows? So, can I ask you this? If Igor is Patrick Waugh, do you pay him? Because hot take, I think Igor retires a top 10 10D. You can't compare that because you're talking about guys that are in a cap era, a hard cap era versus not. You have to draft those centers, Barkov, Lundell, Crosby, Malkin. Yeah, and the Rangers haven't drafted a good center that dominates. And that's really a whole separate issue, is that in general, they freaking rushed this rebuild like way too much. And that's the real issue here. That is really the big issue here. Can you imagine a world, and I mean, this conversation would be entirely different. Could you just imagine a world where one of the two outcomes happen? One, the Devils just The Devils shocked us all on draft night in 2019, and they take Capo Caco, and the Rangers end up with Jack Hughes. Or could you imagine a world where the Rangers front office didn't regard Mika Zibanejad as highly or higher even as Jack Eichel? Because that's what happened. The Rangers thought Mika Zibanejad was better than Eichel, and that's why Eichel never came here. Could you imagine one of those two worlds happen where Eichel was here instead of Mika, or what's it called? Where the Rangers landed Jack Hughes? Because then this conversation, different. And my main point also with this, and my main argument, how many times are the Rangers going to try the same philosophy without doing something different? Again, my point is that you need a serviceable goalie, but the Devils built their roster deep to where they just need a serviceable goalie, and you could find that for a premium price because you don't have to pay my point is you don't have to pay a goalie $12 million to get that type of production. You could get a goalie like Markstrom for $4.5 million or whatever his cap hit is with retention. You could get a Linus Ullmark at the price point that he might sign for this offseason, which is probably going to be $7 to $8 million. You could go do that. Jeremy Swayman's asking for an 8x8. You could go ring the phone and get him for all I care. The point is that paying $12 million for a goalie is just not smart. It's just not. And the Devils also had defensive issues, so I'm not going to sit here and act like they're a perfect team entirely. But my point is that they're in the conversation. But here's my thing. Are they in the conversation because they got Markstrom or because their roster's deep? It's because their roster's deep. Up front, I should say, because defensively they still have work to get done. And they need their guys to develop. Is Forsling really that elite? He played that way. Zibanejad's a great player. Fans got to stop overreacting to him having a down year and was still a point per game. We need him to shoot the puck, though. He needs to... I mean, it's fair to overreact to the year he had. 16 5v5 points from your number one center is just not... It's just not good enough. It's not serviceable. It's not defendable. It was it wasn't even 16. Sorry, it was 25. I mean, even then, 25 points at 5v5 from your number one center is just not good enough. It's just not at all. You need way better production than that. How about this for context? Morgan Barron had more points at 5v5 than Mika Zibanejad. You're making a gamble, and I agree. Listen, I'm not saying that my plan is a foolproof plan of the Rangers are guaranteed to win a cup now, but I'd rather run the risk and trying something different and hoping you win a cup that way versus capping out at being in the Eastern Conference Finals every year. At what point are we tired of them being in the Eastern Conference Finals every year? You think Garon's more than capable? I mean, we have to see him play in the NHL before I could get on board with that take, but I'm a huge fan of Garon, and I think, again, if you were to ask me, I want to look at the upcoming goaltending market as well, outside of Ullmark, but if you were to ask me, or if you were to tell me that Linus Ullmark could be had for $7 million, and then Carter Verhaeghe could be had for like 8.5 or something, or let's just say that price range. I mean, I'm going for both of those guys over paying just Igor Shesterkin. That's my 2 cents on that. So you have, looking at this year's by accident, whoops. Because you still have right now Swayman, who's an RFA. You have Aiden Hill available. Aiden Hill's available. I don't know how much he's going to get, and I don't know if he's the answer either. I don't know what his numbers are. I've looked like since winning that cup, but you do have Aiden Hill who's there, and he's a goalie that has proven that he could get hot in the playoffs if you need him to. Damn, even this year, .931 save percentage. Aiden Hill's available, which he could probably be had for cheaper than Ullmark. He could probably be had for 5.5 to 6. Barring him putting up a Vezina season this year, of course. Ville Husso, Allen, Vanacek, Anderson, Forsberg, Vizmelka. I mean, there's also the trade market, if it got to that point. But Hill is never healthy. Yeah, that's the issue that you run into with that. Hill has his injury issues. But either way, I'm also willing to, if they move on from Igor, I'm also willing to roll the dice and sign a goalie for a cheaper price and let Garon be the 1A, 1B type situation with another goalie. Take a step back and reevaluate yourselves as a contender and see what you got here realistically. I'm not opposed to the idea of taking a step back for a year or two and, you know, reshifting your roster and shaping it up to be a little bit different, especially as more contracts are coming off the books. Maybe you could get out of the Panarin contract, since maybe he wouldn't want to be part of a retool, and you could do that sort of thing and just try something different. And this is, of course, if they don't win this year, because if they win this year, that changes the conversation. But if this is truly the last dance, like we're hearing, then, you know, you have to think that's at least in consideration. So, and I'm not opposed to the idea. I'm really not, because if you go 6 years with this core and they don't win anything, I'm not opposed to the idea of shaking things up and trying something different, taking a step back, evaluating what you have, and, you know, going from there, and then trying this thing again in 1 to 2 years, and trying to win then with a better roster. I'm not opposed to the idea of that. The problem is that Connor McDavid's on a world of his own. Igor Shesterkin, again, I like the guy, and he's put up great numbers. I am not disputing that. But if Jeremy Swayman, if the rumor's true that he's asking for an 8x8 after the postseason he had, then why can't Igor Shesterkin take $10 million or 10.5? I'm sorry, but again, I love Igor, but I'm not going to sit here and say that, like, are we going to sit here and say that he is the Connor McDavid of goaltenders? I don't know if he's that worlds of better than the rest of the goaltending company. I don't think so. Yeah, I like the way Garon looks. I do. Improve the defense and you improve the goaltender. Yeah. The Giants won 2 Super Bowls after Tiki Barber retired. I mean, you could even look at that example right now to, if I'm going to bring football into this as a comparison, look at the Philadelphia Eagles this season. They let go of Hassan Reddick instead of paying him, and they go out and get Saquon Barkley and pay him. And as much as Saquon Barkley has been great for the offense, the defense has taken a massive hit. And I know that they won their most recent game because of the defense, but that defense couldn't get a freaking stop against Atlanta, and they barely were getting stops against Green Bay, and they snuck out with a win there. But the point is that you build your defense, and it's going to help it's going to help your roster as a whole. Look at the Islanders even. Robin Lehner put up an absurd season his 1 year with the Islanders. An absurd season. Are we calling Robin Lehner an elite goalie because he had one elite season, since that's apparently the justification for that? No. But they played a quality defense in front of him. They played the neutral zone trap in front of him, and they got quality goaltending out of him. He leaves, and he's not the same. You look at Thomas Greiss, who was there too. Puts up a great season. They win the Jennings together. And then he walks. He's not the same goalie. Varlamov was pretty much just given away. He goes there, and all of a sudden, he's been a better goalie. Okay, Mash, you're late to the stream. I said this earlier. The Rangers can't make business decisions because of what the New Jersey Devils do. And again, I would hate to see him go to New Jersey. I'm not disputing that. But at the same time, that can't affect what you do. And you're not winning a cup because of Igor. Yes, 80 years, one cup. And you think that Igor Shesterkin, when the history has proven you can't build from the net out, you think that's going to be the answer to the drought? I mean, they've tried this now for 20 years. So, like, do we really think, like, don't we think it's time for a change? I just think that you got to take the leap of faith at some point and realize what you're doing is not working, and it's a risk that you're going to have to take. And I'm not disputing that it's a risk by not paying Igor and trying a different philosophy. But at some point, you got to try something different, because you can't just use goaltending like it's a drug year in and year out and just rely on it to mask your depression. You just can't do that. Like, that's not good for you. That's my point. The point of saying hot or elite goalie is saying you need solid goaltending. I know it's not the same thing. And again, you could find that for the cheap. You don't need to get that. If you build a well-rounded team, then you'll get good goaltending production. The Islanders, look at them again. Look at them as the example. Ever since Devon Toews walked out that door, where have the Islanders been? Ever since Devon Toews walked out that door. Ever since Adam Pelech has declined. Ever since Ryan Pulock has declined. The Islanders aren't in the conference finals anymore because they have up front declining. They have, and everyone thought, oh, wow, Ilya Sorokin's coming over. They get an elite goalie on top of that. It's great defense they have on top of a solid center core they have. Now they're for sure going to win it all. They haven't done much with, they haven't gone really any further with Ilya Sorokin as their goalie. Although, did they go to the conference finals his first year here? But keep in mind, Varlamov, I'm pretty sure, played the postseason that year. But the point is that he played he played 7 games that postseason that 1 year, but I think they started with Varlamov and then went to Sorokin. I could be wrong, but regardless, they've made sacrifices by paying Sorokin, and they're not the same team. Sorokin's not bailing them out, and he's been considered an elite goalie. Like, that's just my point. That is just my point. And he put up very good numbers in that 2022-23 season against Carolina as well. Obviously, that last goal that he allowed, really not pretty. But ever since they've lost key pieces up front and on the back end and had guys decline, they've not been in the conference finals. I'm trying to think of other examples here instead of strictly just the Islanders here, just to like really paint the picture further. But regardless, you guys, I think for the most part, get my point that you can't just treat goaltending like a drug. You just can't. I mean, Even the Winnipeg Jets, again, are just an example where they've let a lot of key contributors on the back end and up front go because of Connor Hellebuck, and they've tried to rely on Connor Hellebuck to win them a cup, and hasn't worked. You will not find that guaranteed on the cheap, though. Is that true, though? Because Jordan Binnington was an AHL call-up. That was a cheap player right there. Aiden Hill was a waiver. Was he a waiver claim or was he traded there? I think he was like given to them basically for free in a trade for like a third or a fourth round pick. Aiden Hill. They pretty much got him. Darcy Kemper. I'm trying to remember how he was acquired by Colorado, but none of these guys were making the type of money we're talking about Igor making is the point here. Again, if he's going to sign for $10 million, different conversation. Completely different conversation. Paying Sorokin that kind of money was insane. So why is it not the same argument for Igor? Why is Sorokin... So, Sorokin, who almost won the Vezina, if it wasn't for Linus Ullmark having an unbelievable season. Sorokin, who had an unreal season in 2022-23, an unreal season in 21-22. That was an insane contract. But Igor Shesterkin, who has put up .915 save percentages year in and year out. And I get, again, the postseason. I get it. But Sorokin's postseason numbers, too, outside of this postseason, were good. And obviously Igor has more games to him. But Sorokin's contract was insane. But it's not insane to give Igor 12. Don't you think they should be in the same ballpark then? Around that? But so if that's the so if you're saying, if you're interpreting it that way, that one good season, because I just said he had multiple good seasons, first of all. Second of all, what's the argument for Igor? Because he had a good 2021-22, a historic year, and that should give him $12 million for something he did 3 years ago at this point. And that's just one season. Outside of that, he's been a .916 save percentage goalie the rest of the time. If you average, here, let's average out, if I can, if it lets me. It's not going to let me do it. But if you average out his past two seasons, he's averaged to a .914 save percentage. What's my cutoff cost for Igor? 10, but 10.5, maybe. It's pushing it, but maybe. But why should Igor get 12 when Sorokin has statistically put up better seasons than him outside of that one season that Igor had, which was historic? Why is it insane that Sorokin got that money, but Igor should get 12 million when he's been arguably worse statistically? But is that because of Sorokin? Because Sorokin's playoff numbers even have, again, his numbers have been good in the postseason. We're talking a .924 save percentage, talking a .922 save percentage. Those are very good numbers. It's because they are over-relying on goaltending now that they have it. They lost pieces up front and on the back end, and they didn't have enough to beat Carolina because of it. That's why. But I am going, and that's the other real issue. The Islanders literally, I mean, as much as we're talking about Igor really carrying the Rangers, the Islanders literally have like nobody that is really on an elite level. Like they don't have that type of talent really at all. And their special teams are their special teams are horrendous. And then at 5v5, they're like a below average team as well. Yeah, Dobson's not near Fox's level. But regardless, I am going to wrap this up because I've been going for long and I do have to leave either way here. And the Met game's going to be on in about an hour. So we'll have a lot to get into on that. But that is going to be it for me. If you're watching on replay, I appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And again, civil debates, please. Civil debates. We don't have to murder each other and hate each other because of opinions. We could disagree. At the end of the day, we want this team to win a Stanley Cup, and I appreciate the back and forth and the civilization between the back and forth, Robert. And I appreciate that you're able to be respectable about that. I really do, because a lot of it on Twitter is just, oh, fuck you, you're an idiot, fuck you, fuck this. Like, I appreciate the back and forth that we're able to have here as a community, because at the end of the day, we just want this team to win a freaking Stanley Cup. We might not agree on the way that they should get there, but we want this team to win a Stanley Cup. So if you're watching on replay, plead your case. Tell me, but civil. Otherwise, I'm just going to block whoever from the channel. I'm not going to hesitate on that. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Do not forget to leave a like if you haven't already. Do not forget to subscribe. Turn on your notifications so you know when I upload or go live on the channel next. And I will see you guys in the next one.